Hey everyone. So I'm sorry we weren't able to actually get that lesson in live, but this is the next best thing. So I hope you all are having a great time staying at home, having fun outside. Be sure to go outside. Weather's good, except for when it gets cold like this. So this is going to be our new lesson for today. There'll be two other new lessons this week. And I'll have those. You guys can reach me during my office hours or during those virtual lessons to ask about all the different questions that you'll have for this. All right. So today's first topic is over trig ratios. Okay. So if you ever hear me say the word trig, that's actually short for the word trigonometry. Okay. All right, which is basically the relationship of triangles, of their angles and their sides. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to focus on a special type of triangle, which is a right triangle, which I got drawn here. All right, and so the only way that we know that it's a right triangle is if we have this symbol in the corner, the 90 degree, the right angle. Okay, so if one corner is 90 degrees, we're dealing with a right triangle. So we can use trig to help us find missing sides or angles based on what we're doing. We're not going to be doing any math today. All we're going to do is learn how to label and set up equations. Okay, we're not going to do anything else. All right, so let's zoom in and focus on this triangle here. All right, so there's one new symbol that we're going to talk about. All right, it is this guy. It's a circle with like a little dash in the middle. What he means is the word theta. Okay, we say it as theta. Alright, if you say theta, then you got it. Alright, and so we're going to put that symbol. What that symbol means is angle. It represents an angle in our triangle. So we have our theta down in one of our angles. Alright, so everything is based off of where this angle is, of how we're going to label it. So let's talk about our different sides of the triangle. Okay, there's one that we talked about when we were doing Pythagorean theorem. The angle that's always across our right angle is called the hypotenuse. It is the longest side of our triangle, it's the diagonal, and it's always across from our right angle. Okay, now we're going to start labeling the other two sides that we have. Alright, so the other side that we have, so if we start where our theta is, and we draw a line going to the side that is on the other, across from it, we call that the opposite. Alright, now there's one more side, and that side is based off of where our angle is. So whenever our angle, the side that connects our angle to the right angle, right, that is our adjacent. Now we've talked about the word adjacent before in angles. Back at the very beginning of the semester, adjacent means next to. It is the side that is next to the angle that is not the hypotenuse. Okay? So we have three different sides here. We have the hypotenuse, we have opposite, and we have adjacent. Alright? Now, just to kind of help you guys out with this, I'm going to abbreviate things. Okay? Now, our triangle can change directions. So I'm going to relabel a triangle. That way you guys have this with you. But I want to draw my triangle a little differently this time. It's going to be kind of upside down. There you go. Okay, so it's kind of upside down from there, and here's my right angle. And I'm going to label my sides according to this, and I'm going to put my theta down here. Okay, my angle that I'm looking for or using to represent. Okay, our main focus. All right. So the side that is across my right angle is my hypotenuse. The side that is across my theta or my angle that's given to me is my opposite. And then the side that connects my angle to the right angle is my adjacent. So I use 3 letters to represent these. HYP for hypotenuse, OPP for opposite, ADJ for adjacent. If you want to use the first letters, you can, okay? So in trigonometry, what I had the hardest time with was knowing how to set it up. Everyone in my class always said, it's easy. All you got to do is be able to use SOHCAHTOA. I was so mad because I couldn't spell SOHCAHTOA. I had the hardest time. I want you guys to write this down on every page. Every time we get to a trig problem, I want you to write SOHCAHTOA. All right? And this is how it's spelled. S O H, so, ca, C-A, H, and toa, T-O-A. Now, if you notice, the O's and the A's and the H's all represent the sides of our triangles. The S, the C, and the T represent different types of trig functions. Okay, now I'm going to go over them with you in just a second. All right, so our first one, S-O-H. The S stands for sine. Okay, that's how we spell it out, the whole word, but we don't use the whole word. We're just going to use the first 3 letters, S-I-N. So if you ever look on a calculator and you see the word sin, that's actually sine and it's abbreviated. So the sine, and right next to sine, this is how we set up the equation. We have parentheses, and our angle always goes inside our parentheses. Okay, so I'm using theta to represent our angle. And that equals, okay, a ratio. Now, when we talk about ratios, ratios are just fancy words for fractions. Okay, and in this case, our fraction that we have for sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So opposite over hypotenuse. Okay? Now, for the next one, cosine. So we spell cosine C-O-S-I-N-E. Alright, think of cosine kind of the opposite of sine. Alright, so we spell this one C-O-S, and inside our parentheses goes our theta, which is our angle. Like I said, our angle will always go inside the parentheses when we set these up. And equals, okay, so our cosine, right here, its ratio is what? A over H. So the A stood for adjacent, and the H stood for hypotenuse. Okay? Our last one that we're going to talk about is tangent. And that's the one that starts with the letter T. Alright, so whenever we use to abbreviate it, so T-A-N, and guess what's going inside our parentheses? Our angle. Alright, so theta equals, okay, and for tangent, our ratio is opposite over adjacent. Now, take a quick look. Each of our ratios, sine, cosine, and tangent, they share some of the same words, but does each of those fractions have the exact same ones as any others and in the same order? No. They're all just slightly different using those 3 sides. Okay? So that's going to be very helpful for us whenever we start to set these things up on our own. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I want you guys to draw a triangle. Alright, so just kind of off to the side over here. Let's draw a triangle. Let's draw it like this. Okay. Here's our 90 degree. And I want you to label the corners. A, B, and C. Just to kind of give our angles a name. Okay. So we're going to talk about these guys here in just a second. And then now we're going to give measurements to this triangle. Okay, so the top up here, I want you to label it 12. On the side, 5. And then that diagonal piece, I want you to label it 13. Okay. So our goal with this right now is just being able to label our triangle and then setting up the ratios. Okay, so I want to focus in on angle A. So right here, this angle. So let's go ahead and draw theta there. There's my theta. So before I even start trying to figure out what ratio I need to use, there's my angle. I need to set up my triangle. I need to label the parts of it. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to label is my hypotenuse. I look for my 90 degree angle. It's at letter B. I'm going to draw a line across from it. I land on what side? 13. I'm going to label that HYP for my hypotenuse. Okay, now I'm going to go to my theta. I'm going to draw a line going to the other side, the side across from it. I land on the 5. Well, it's opposite of my angle. So I'm going to label this side opposite. And then the last thing I got is where my angle is and where the line that it connects it to my 90 degree, well, that's the 12. So I'm going to label that adjacent. So now I have all my sides labeled. I have my angle identified. All right, so now I can start setting up these trig ratios. So for sine, okay, so sine of A, since I'm focusing on angle A, equals, and we put it in parentheses, right? Okay, so sine used what two sides? If I look back up at my key up here, I have opposite and I have hypotenuse. Okay, and the order matters of how I write this. Okay, so my opposite side is on the top of the fraction. So what number is going to go on the top? Well, I labeled the 5 opposite, so the 5 is going to go on top. All right, and hypotenuse is on the bottom, so I labeled my 13, my hypotenuse, so the 13 is going to go down on the bottom. Boom, that's it, I'm done. And that's what we're learning today. We're just learning up how to set up that ratio. My end goal for you guys to be able to do by the end of today is just give me that fraction. Okay, it's not a hard thing to do, but it does take practice labeling the triangles, and that's going to be the hardest part. Okay, so let's do a few more. We're going to do a couple more examples, and then you guys can look back at this and say, okay, I got this. So I want to do one more with the same triangle, okay, because I can use the same trig functions on the same triangle and end up with different answers. So my next one I'm going to do is cosine of A. Okay, so cosine used adjacent and hypotenuse. Okay, so my adjacent is going to go on the top of the fraction. The hypotenuse is going to go on the bottom of it. So I labeled what adjacent? I labeled the 12. So the 12 is going to go on the top, since it's on the top. And then my hypotenuse was 13, so that's going to end up on the bottom, since my hypotenuse is on the bottom for cosine. And boom, done. That's it. That was my answer. Okay? Shouldn't get too much harder than this. Alright, so let's get practice of just labeling some triangles. Alright, so I'm going to scroll down just a little bit. Okay? And we're going to draw a new triangle. Where do we have that one there? So I want to draw this. There's my triangle. Here's my right angle. I want you to label the corners K, L, M, and my sides 16, 30, and 34. Okay, so I have a new triangle. I don't have my SOHCAHTOA anymore, so I'm going to rewrite it. So if I remember how to spell it, So, S-O-H, Ka, C-A-H, Toa, T-O-A. Alright, so I have my ratios there, my how to set it up. That SOHCAHTOA is how you set it up. After that, everything gets easy. Okay, so in our questions that I want to focus on is I want to figure out the ratios in respect to side L, or sorry, angle L. Okay, so that's where I'm going to start putting my theta. All right, and I want to do the cosine and the sine of L. All right, so cosine of L and the sine of L equals what ratio? Okay, well, before I can actually answer that, I got to label that triangle. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in on this triangle and we're going to label it really quick. Okay, first thing I label is my hypotenuse. So I look for my right angle, boom, found it right here. I'm going to draw a line going to the side across from my right angle, and I land on the 34. I'm going to label that HYP. Okay, now the side across from my angle, so I found, the side across from my angle, draw a line going across, I land on the 30. I'm going to label that opposite because it's across from my angle. And lastly, I have a side that connects my angle to my 90 degrees. Okay, that is my adjacent. Okay, so I look at my ratios, I look at my triangle, I see my fractions. The first thing I have is cosine. Okay, cosine right here. So I use A over H. Well, A stood for adjacent, so my adjacent was 16, and then the H was 34, so my my 34 goes on the bottom. There's my answer, 16 over 34. Okay? Sine of L. Alright, so sine is a little bit different than cosine. Alright, so I got to use this setup. O over H. Well, what did I label O? O stood for opposite, so opposite is 30. So 30 goes on the top. And then the H is on the bottom, so my hypotenuse is 34. Now the order does matter. If you wrote this as 34 over 30, you would be wrong. Do not do that. Okay? Make sure you have that correct order. Okay, so now I'm going to throw a little bit of a curveball to you. So remember how I talked about our angle wherever we're focusing in on? I want to change that up a little bit. I want you guys to find the tangent of M and the cosine of M. Okay, so the big difference, before we were looking at angle L, now we're switching it up, we're looking at angle M. So that means I have to relabel my triangle. So I'm going to go back to my triangle and I'm going to erase parts of it. Okay, I'm going to erase that theta. Oh no, I need a smaller. I'm going to erase that theta. I'm going to erase my lines in here. Okay, but I want to keep those letters the same. I want you guys to see this. Okay, so my theta is now going to be at the letter M, so I'm going to draw my theta over there, and I'm going to relabel things. Okay, alright, so across my 90 degrees is my hypotenuse. Did that change from before? No, it didn't change. Across my theta is 16. Well, if it's across my angle, theta, then it's my opposite. Hey, that one changed. That was adjacent before, now it's opposite. So that guy changed. And the side that connects my angle to my 90 degrees, well, if it connects it, it's next to it, it's adjacent. Well, that was opposite before. So what things changed here? When I switch up my angles, so when I switch from L to M, the only things that changed in labeling this was my adjacent and opposite. They flipped. Okay? So watch out for that. If you look at your angles, I want you to relabel your triangle. Okay? So I'm going to erase our old labels now. That way we don't get confused when we start doing this. Okay, so we have our new sides all labeled and all that good stuff. Let's look at it. Tangent. Okay, let's use, what color do I want to use? Let's use some purple. So tangent uses opposite and adjacent. Okay, so opposite is on the top, so I got to look for my opposite. Here it is. I labeled that 16, so I'm going to put that on the top. Okay, adjacent was on the bottom, so I'm going to find my adjacent. Here it is. Alright, so that was 30. There's my answer. Okay, and that was for tangent. Cosine. Alright, back with cosine. That used adjacent and hypotenuse. Okay, so my adjacent is on top. So I go find my adjacent. Here he is. So that's 30. So it's on top. And then I use my hypotenuse. There's my hypotenuse. It's 34, so he goes on the bottom. There you go. And that's pretty much it. We can go one step further in case if any of your assignments require this. You can reduce your fractions here. For example, 16 over 30, we can reduce that fraction to 8 over 15. You can just type these guys into your calculator and that should be able to give you your answers that you have for that. Okay, 30 over 14 would be 15 over 17 and so forth. Okay, just type those in calculators if you got them, if it'll give you a fraction answer. If not, you can always type it into Google or Desmos and just kind of figure out which is the correct answer. Use some problem solving skills on that. I hope you guys have a great day. That's it for the lesson. Message me if you have any questions. See you, love you, bye.